Hello everyone, this is Peak Entertainment and we are back again. And here we have now another edition in the Unrated and Underappreciated movie review series. And this edition we will look at the magnificent gangster drama Carlito's Way. Released in November the 12th, 1993, it stars Al Pacino, Sean Penn, Penelope Ann Miller and John Louis Guizamo, and it was directed by Brian De Palma. It tells the story of ex-criminal Carlito Brigandte, who has managed to get released early from prison with the help of his attorney Dave Kleinfeld. Elated and jubilant at his release, Carlito promises to go legit and stay away from crime, but over the course of the story, certain events lead him back to the dangerous life that he yearned so much to get away from. Now for me, Carlito's Way is a superb, very beautiful and in many ways romanticised gangster drama. It's a very rich, very classy, well judged, near masterpiece, masterfully directed by Brian De Palma. This is of course him reuniting with Al Pacino, and we all know their previous collaboration, the epic, iconic and still one of the greatest movies of all time, Scarface. And in comparison, Carlito's Way is a much more of a somber, restrained gangster drama. It's far less hyper-violent and extreme, but it's also still very watchable and very compelling. A lot of this, of course, is down to Al Pacino, and really, what more can we say about this actor? Still, for me, perhaps the greatest living actor that I've seen in my lifetime. We could spend hours talking about the great roles that he's played throughout his career, but Carlito's Way is actually one of his most undervalued performances. We all love his energetic, bombastic performances. If we look over the years at the likes of Scarface, as I mentioned before, A Scent of a Woman, which he won an Oscar for, Any Given Sunday, and of course his great collaboration with Robert De Niro. But there are other layers to his acting abilities, and in this performance it's a much more of a constrained and much more of a balanced and measured performance, and it's a wonderful personalities that he's created in Carlito Brigandte. As a character, Carlito is instantly likeable and rootable character straight away from the opening scene where we see his excitement and his jubilant reaction to being released early from prison. We have those great lines that he says. He's invigorated, he's exhilarated at being released. It's a great opening scene, draws you immediately to the character, making you liking him straight away. Throughout the movie you're just cheering for Carlito, you want him to succeed, you want him to end up happy and enjoying his life, and that's always great for any movie. If you can somehow get the character engaged with the viewer, then you're already onto a winning performance and a winning movie, and Carlito's Way is a magnificent, great example of how this is done. This is Pacino, still full of charisma, but very much of a likability, yet not quite as sensational or hyperbolic as I mentioned before as his previous performances. I always look at Carlito Brigandte as what Tony Montana from Scarface would be if he spent a term in prison and he came out and he was a lot more weary, humble, full of regret, full of remorse. And I honestly think, in a strange kind of way, Carlito's Way is a non-de facto sequel to Scarface. You know, we always get the way where we get the more hyped up, spectacular movie, and then we get the much more mature, restrained movie, and that's what I see in this Carlito's Way, and particularly in this character. Pacino is almost equally matched by Sean Penn's performance as Dave Kleinfeld. In the beginning we see that he's very loyal and committed to Carlito, but over the course of the story we find that he is in many ways as corrupt and underhanded as the gangsters that Carlito has had to deal with in the past. It's a brilliant, transformative performance from Sean Penn, one of the movie industry's most versatile actors. We always regard Sean Penn as playing these very powerful, imposing characters, very vivid, authoritative on the screen. But as Dave Kleinfeld, it's a very much of a untrustworthy, slimy, sleazy personality, and it's still very much a compelling performance from Sean Penn. And you look at his appearance, from his curly hair to his glasses, the way he walks, his little mannerisms, his little phrases, it's completely different in terms of form, in terms of reputation. It's a testament again to how much Sean Penn was a very personality and a very much of a versatile actor, that he was able to play this performance. So I credit him very much in this role as much as I do Pacino. Penelope Ann Miller is also very good as Carlito's long lost love Gail, and this is where we get the very much of the familiar story of an ex-con coming out of prison and reuniting with his former partner and wanting to reconnect again, and they have very good chemistry. I think Penelope Ann Miller and Al Pacino, it's a relationship that you completely believe in. Gail is that very much of what we see normally of a character who she's a dancer in a strip club, but she has aspirations of wanting to better her life and looking for a better tomorrow, and it's whether she can trust the Carlito to follow her on her dreams. Again, very familiar story of the woman wanting the ex-con to change his ways and not get involved again in the life of crime. So we have seen this a lot of times, but I think it's handled very well, and there are lots of nice tender moments between the two of them as we see Gail initially not convinced by Carlito and his aims in wanting to go straight, but over the course of the story she believes him more, and I think it's just a nice and well judged relationship dynamic between the two. We also have another fantastic performance by John Leguizamo as Benny Blanco, the typical up-and-coming wannabe gangster. He constantly clashes with Carlito, feeling that Carlito doesn't give him the respect that he deserves. It's a great performance from John Leguizamo. He's very cocky, very reckless, ambitious. I love the typical American kind of accent that he has. And of course, this is one of the most famous elements of Carlito's Way that people talk about, that I know, the Benny Blanco from the Bronx. That's his reputation name, and it's a great performance from John Leguizamo throughout on here. As well as a much textured story, Brian De Palma continues to show his expertise in creating well executed action sequences, and the two of note throughout this movie includes one at the quarter of the way through the movie where we see Carlito helping a young kid and then he goes to a pool game, and I love the suspense and tension that Brian De Palma generates throughout, and this is something that's very typical throughout his style of filmmaking. Yes, a lot of critics compare his style to the Alfred Hitchcock way of filming, where you have these long tracking shots, bird's eye view, using very depth and dense musical score to really ramp up the tension. And Brian De Palma has admitted this very much through that he uses Hitchcock a lot, has his inspiration building throughout his movies. And if you just go through some of the best of his movies, when we're looking at the likes of The Untouchables and Carrie as well, Casualties of War, which I previously mentioned in this series of Unrated Underappreciated, you can definitely see the different styles and techniques that he's got. He's got a very distinctive way of filmmaking, and Carlito's Way is great throughout. I mentioned before this pool game sequence where Carlito finds himself struggling for his life, and then the second of Brian De Palma's masterful direction is in the climatic final 20 minutes, which is thrilling, suspenseful, exciting and tense throughout. Without spoiling it too much, you're just constantly on the edge of your seat all the way through, and it shows Brian De Palma's various techniques and how he shows tracking shots, different angles and long takes, showing what a masterful director he is. And it's really a spectacular and thrilling and very fitting conclusion to what I believe is a masterful gangster drama. So if I had to give a score for Carlito's Way, I would give it a 9.3 out of 10. Masterful direction from Brian De Palma, very beautiful and very matured, aided by brilliant performances from all its main leads, including Al Pacino and Sean Penn. Now, when we talk about the release of Carlito's Way, it had a budget of 30 million and unfortunately only grossed around 63.8 million worldwide. So when we look at the reasons for this underperformance, I think a lot of it was down to the gangster drama in general, and by the early 90s it was a genre that had really faded out in terms of mainstream audiences. Yes, we did have the like of Goodfellas in 1990, and that is a lot more culturally revered than what Carlito's Way is, and later on we would get Casino as well. But if we look at these type of movies, they weren't box office smashes. You know, they were very critically well received, and their status and legacy had built up really years after they were released. And I think in the early 90s now we were introduced a lot more to the big spectacle event film. So we were coming off, of course, the likes of Terminator 2 and Jurassic Park, and it was much more of an expansive and blockbuster feel to the early 90s that we audiences were being introduced to. So when you get a much more of an R-rated gangster drama that's focused a lot more on character rather than action and spectacle, it just wasn't something that audiences were really attuned to at a specific time. It's a lot less sensational than Scarface, and maybe that wasn't enough of an X factor to put in audiences. Yes, Al Pacino was coming off his Oscar win for A Scent of a Woman, but that itself wasn't really a massive blockbuster hit, so there was no really momentum that Carlito's Way could kind of feed off, despite the fact that Al Pacino back then was still revered as one of the greatest actors, and that he did win what was an overdue Oscar for A Scent of a Woman, but there was no real hype or sensation that Carlito's Way could use to build off that Oscar win from Al Pacino. So I just think it's very unfortunate because, as I mentioned before, Carlito's Way is truly a magnificent gangster drama, and it just doesn't get mentioned in the filmography of Brian De Palma or indeed Al Pacino. And I think it's a shame, because when you look at Carlito's Way, we could argue that in some aspects maybe it's as good as Scarface or improves on certain elements of Scarface, is that it's not as excessive, it's a far more somber, maybe downbeat gangster drama, but it's very beautiful and there are very touching moments. And like I said, we have a very likeable and rootable protagonist in Carlito's Way that really brings you to the movie in the long run and has you constantly rooting for him. And it's a very magnificent and very impressive gangster drama from Brian De Palma, and definitely deserves more recognition and appreciation. So those are my thoughts on the review of Carlito's Way. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you've seen the movie, did you enjoy it, and do you feel like me that it deserved more recognition and appreciation, or did you feel it wasn't as sensational and as exciting and vivid as the previous gangster movies from the past era? If you haven't seen it, then take time to watch it. I truly believe you will enjoy it, and when you do, let me know what you think in the comments below. Also, if you have any other choices of movies that you feel were underappreciated at the time and deserve more recognition and praise than what they did in their initial release, let me know what you think in the comments below. And if I've seen a movie, then I would indeed provide a review for it in the long run. But those are my thoughts on a magnificent gangster drama in Carlito's Way. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Also hit those like and subscribe buttons and help me grow this channel in the long run, continuing to provide you with high quality content and reviews such as this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.